Welcome everyone to another episode of the Love Talks. I'm Dr. Esther Abrilka, a psychologist and love and relationship consultant. In this podcast, my guests and I talk about relationships, marriages, dating, love, and other important life topics. You can listen to us on Anchor and other platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. In the last episode of the Love Talks, me and my guest, Anne Blunt, the founder of selfishlyhappywoman.com and international relationship love and sex coach, spoke about how important communication is in creating intimacy in a relationship or marriage. Today, we continue our discussion on the topic of intimacy, but we are going to focus more on Tantra and sex. Let's begin. Yeah, that's right. And well, communication is very important because that's how you nourish this couple bubble, as we spoke at the beginning. So that's a very important part. But yeah, I got really interested in this tantric intimacy that you've mentioned because I think it was yesterday I was reading something, and that was an article on something really else. It wasn't about intimacy or sex as such. But there was a sentence or two that mentioned that, well, sex is like an exchange of energies, and it's very important in what sort of mental shape, emotional shape you are starting to have sex with your partner, and also in what sort of shape he or she is. Because you are exchanging energies through the act of having sex. So it's not only a mechanical thing, it's not only a physical activity, but it's something that, especially in a relationship, should also serve other things like creating a deeper bond and feeling that, well, you are one with this special person. So could you tell me a bit about this tantric intimacy?
Well,
And how it relates to physical intimacy and how these are connected? Because, well, in this topic, I'm not an expert, so I'm very happy to hear from you.
well, wow, that's a big question, and I don't know if anybody is an expert in that arena nowadays. We're talking about 5,000 years old philosophy
Yeah, of
that
course,
comes from
that's
the
a very
same,
old thing.
same path as yoga does, hatha yoga does. So it is very similar to that. But what's really exciting to me as a coach and even academic, but also as a coach, especially, is that it's linking nowadays very well with neuroscience and understanding what we've been discussing about three parts of our brain and our nervous system and what we've been conditioned and how we can rewire ourselves to become more integrated human beings and more conscious. So I quite like that, ancient tradition linked with modern science. But for me, Tantra is something that is, the way I've understood it, we have two different types of Tantra, being a bit stereotypical here. There is classical Tantra and Neo-Tantra, and classical Tantra is more a philosophy and a spiritual path. And Neo-Tantra, especially when it was brought to the Western world from China and India, became more linked with sex. And for me, I really personally want to draw from both traditions, and I don't really feel that there is a need to be so terribly strict with one or the other, but actually use them for the benefit of my clients and myself as well, because I do these practices, to be able to be a better coach for others as well. So for me, tantric philosophy and practices are bringing myself into that space where I feel more whole and more part of my true self. So what does that mean in relationships and physical intimacy especially? I think it has a lot to be able to feel that vulnerability in a safe space. It feels I believe that you can't really practice Tantra in any way if you don't feel safe and secure.
Well, of course, I think that feeling safe and secure is the first thing that we need to feel
Yeah.
in a relationship.
Yeah. And even when you do these practices on yourself, you need to feel that you have an empowered part of yourself that knows that you will be safe, and you don't feel that it is something that is becoming scary. But in terms of sexual practices, I would say that there are few key things that will help us to be more in our body, and that way then more in our spiritual selves as well. And what you were saying about connecting with the other person and being one, breath is one of the most important things, I would say. It is being able to express yourself also vocally. We know women vocalize a lot during
Yeah,
love
that's
making,
right.
but also men ought to do that more, because it will help them to be not to kind of needing to control yourself and think about some boring thoughts, so that you can prolong the
Yeah,
love making.
exactly.
It's counterproductive actually. But to be able to breathe into it and to be able to circulate that energy is something that anybody can learn. And also to vocalize and allow yourself to, because when we vocalize something, we take down the cortical control, so we are not anymore in our thinking minds, and that often causes the havoc, doesn't it? It's
It
kind of,
does.
we start the critical mind. Oh, you look horrible, you're nothing like those people in those porn films or adverts or films or whatever. And there can be so many destructive voices in our heads, and it's all being worried about performance or our looks or whatever. So
Yeah, like
to be able
these
to,
days we
yeah,
are focused not on what we are supposed to be focused, but we are focusing on all these things that do not really matter, as you said, like the looks, whether we look as good as a porn star or some other celebrity. And that's something that doesn't really help, does it?
no, it doesn't. And it becomes, like you mentioned earlier, it becomes mechanical, technical act, which is something that you're kind of achieving something or performing something. And when we're talking about true lovemaking, it is, and that connection, it is about being able to be safe there and to be able to feel into your body. Sometimes it doesn't feel ecstatic, sometimes it does. Sometimes it can be really emotional, because it can be healing. It can be laughter producing, because you start realizing that something is beyond words. And just going back to the communication, sometimes you don't need to communicate everything. It's just to be able to feel is more important than words. But afterwards you can always talk about it. But in the situation, you can use your words, you can use your play, you can use your breath, you can use your voice to sound to vocalize your breath and your excitement or whatever is going on with you. It's just something we ought to celebrate. So if you hear your next door neighbor vocalizing, you should just celebrate, say yes, they are having fun, they're having some beautiful experiences there, and having ecstasy and joy and bliss. What is more beautiful? Why have we made sex and pleasure so dirty, so bad, so evil?
I don't know.
I don't know, and it's a sad thing. And I think we are on the mission of changing that, aren't we, Astura?
Yeah, I think so, because, well, sex is very important, but yeah, in the today's society, when we have lots of porn, and especially in the West, where sex is pretty much available 24/7, because, well, it is. Yeah. We kind of don't think about sex as something that is bonding in a relationship, but not bonding just as having sex as such, but as something that should also serve this other purpose of having this bubble, nourishing your couple, yourself, your partner. It's just something that became so technical here and so available that it's not really regarded anything special these days by many people. And well, maybe that's one of the reasons why we are talking here today, because we also want to, well, debunk some myths about sex. And even in the Western world, where there are many people now who are actually putting more attention to having sex not only as sex, as a technical thing, as some fun, without any feelings or any emotions that are underlying this activity. But many people now are turning into thinking about sex as something that is a bit deeper than that. And yeah, so I don't know. Have you noticed that, or?
I actually think it's a spiritual path, and lots of people, maybe it is with people that I am drawing towards myself at the moment, are people who are also wanting to use it as a spiritual path to enlightenment, which I find really exciting. It's so fascinating, and to be able to be present either in self-pleasuring, because we don't need another person to be able to evoke bliss and ecstasy, and also spiritual experiences, and just to be present there and layer off the conditionings and traumas and stresses from our bodies is so healing. It's very, very important. And I think it's when you are able to really surrender in that situation, you're feeling safe enough to surrender, whether you're whatever gender you are. It is something that really brings you home. It really helps you to understand, not in words, but in terms of experience and feelings, what everything is about. And there is that kind of, it's just very difficult to say in words, but it is something really profound that I think we've missed in Western world. And it is so wonderful to be able to say that, yes, there is an alternative to instant gratification of, for instance, porn or the sex as a release mechanism of stress or something. We have a very patriarchal way of understanding, for instance, what orgasm is. It's that kind of
Exactly.
turn on, climax,
yeah.
and then release. And that's so boring. I mean, it's one way, fair enough, but it's not all of it. And we don't really in Western world understand how much more, how much beauty, how much joy and fun and ecstasy we can experience if we understand that orgasm is many, many more myriads of ways of experiencing lovemaking or self-pleasure. And you can be, even as a man, you can be multi-orgasmic. As a man, you don't need to ejaculate, and you still can have an orgasm. Women can ejaculate, and it's just that, and that kind of altered state of your mind is one of the things that I suppose I would, if I were to define orgasm again, I would say that it has that altered state of your mind, and it is about surrender. It is about being able to relax into that present moment by breathing, vocalizing, and moving. Movement is so important as well. And lots of people just keep doing the same thing. They're basically, what's happening is that we are rewiring our brain again, our nervous system again and again and again, if we always do it in the same way, because it gives such gratification. It gives that surge of endorphins, and it's fine. But if you want to be adventurous and learn more about it, there are other ways. And I think that's the excitement of this work, really, for me.
Yeah, this is exactly what I wanted to ask, because, well, in the Western culture, we are about pretty much about this instant gratification. Well, not only us, I mean, well, there can be people around the world who are about just instant gratification in sex and having orgasm. And this is what is the ultimate goal of having sex. But yeah, I think I read somewhere that in the Tantric tradition, as you said, it's not only about having orgasm, it's about well, being very present with your partner and having well, gratification, which is not the typical orgasm, but we understand it in here in the Western world, so to say. So that's something which is very important because, well, from my perspective, I think that for many people, and well, not only in the Western culture, but it's also in other cultures, maybe happening more often these days, that sex has lost this sacrum part in a way, and it's just became the way to pleasure yourself, well, whether it's with a partner or whether it's by yourself, just to release, just to, you know, treat it sometimes as something that helps us to cope with all the tension that we've gathered throughout the day or throughout the week or whatever. And it doesn't, sex doesn't really mean that much anymore here, and probably changing that would be a good idea to start getting more awareness about yourself and also about your relationship, more clarity why you are with your partner if you have a partner, and that's very important, I think.
Yeah, and it's not just about sacred sexuality, it is also about better sex. Because often, you know, I'm quite, as a Finnish person, I'm always a bit surprised how little sex education has done to bring awareness about, you know, just basic stuff about sex and sexuality in some countries. And even in Finland, I don't think it's that good. But it was something that I grew up with, and it was normal. It is absolutely part of our lives. And there are so many people who think, for instance, that they don't know that their bodies can't orgasm, or because it's been so narrowly defined. And there are people who don't understand how to be and show up within a sexual relationship. And unfortunately, there is still the completely mistaken notion that it is just for men, and, you know, it is just something that, you know, still I think one of the biggest issues in some older relationships especially is that it is for men and not for women, and that's how you've been brought up. And it's really a sad thing. And to be able to have coach women as well, so, you know, to be able to, you know, somebody who's been married for decades and all of a sudden finds her own orgasmic self, you know, it's just really so beautiful, sad but beautiful to see that person who thinks that they'd never be able to do that all of a sudden finds it. And anybody can have that pleasure. Anybody. I mean, it's not you're not broken. It's just that there's so many layers of conditioning and wrong information. Yeah, it can be done. It can be done.
Yeah, exactly. It's about conditioning. It's, well, pretty much about the culture that we are brought up in, but not only. It's what we have in our brains. And this expression that you use, rewiring our brains, that's actually something which I think very well reflects what we are talking here about today. Because, well, there are very many people out there, especially women, who, as you said, they may have been in a relationship for many years or married for many years. And well, for them, sex is kind of like a thing that is for men to pleasure the man, you know, understood in terms of maybe marital duties or something like that, but not something that brings pleasure to them. And that's not, I guess, the approach that we should take anymore, because sex is for both sexes, right? If we are in a relationship, then both partners should enjoy it and use it as a way to get pleasure, but also as a way to make the bond between them deeper. So, well, everyone should benefit from good sex. I very much agree with you in this respect.
And women, you know, let's not forget, women are, you know, by nature creative creatures. We are the ones who bring ecstasy and life on this planet, and it is in our birthright to have those sexual experiences that are mind and consciousness altering, and really, you know, bring that creation through sex, you know, whether it's through a child or through other creative purposes. And with sacred sexuality, we can use and harness that sexual power, which is our life force in effect, into anything. We can create a better world when we know how to harness that power and sexual energy for transmuting it into other ways. So there's so much we don't know, and so much beauty in there. There is one interesting, if I may share,
Of course.
Really big mind-opening, eye-opening thing for myself, and I think it might help other people as well, which is a bit funny actually. But in Taoistic tradition, we know the Chinese symbol of yin and yang, the round,
of course,
with black and white, and how we all have the yin, the feminine, and yang, the masculine. And those are the kind of things that Tantra also acknowledges, that we all have both of them, including in our sexual lives. And that's very interesting. We won't go into that now. But what I wanted to briefly to share is that we have polar opposites parts, just going back to the communication as well, and the intimacy, and where the driving force of action happens. So if we take two parts of ourselves, our hearts and our genitals. So what Tantra teaches is that women's genitals are more yin, they're more feminine, they're more receptive, they're more, it takes a little bit longer to kind of coax and, have that foreplay. And in my opinion, by the way, foreplay starts immediately when the previous act finished. So I think that's something, it's just that, showing, talking your partner's love language, whether it's about affirmations or touch or quality time together.
It's like a holistic approach.
Yeah, exactly. And, those are the things that we need to really think about when we're talking about good relationship and intimacy building. So anyway, so we can understand intuitively that females' genitals are more yin and men's are more masculine. So the polar opposite of men's penis is very directive. It knows exactly what to do, and it's a direct route. This is the goal, and there we go. And lots of men struggle. Do we still have this foreplay? 5 minutes. Is that enough? It's that
right.
Kind of
very goal oriented.
Yeah, and I mean that's a joke. We've all seen sitcoms and people joke about women crossing their legs and no, you're not coming in. You're not. And what's interesting is that Tantra teaches that our hearts are also polar opposites. But guess what?
The other way around.
The other way around. Exactly. So men's hearts are more yin and women's hearts are more yang. So just feel into that. How many times do we go, as women, and start directing immediately to man's heart and talk about your emotions, tell me how you feel. And, why did you say that?
Yeah,
and
that's what we do.
And the men are they are crossing figuratively their legs on their hearts and saying, oh my gosh, go away. You're not coming into my heart, without any delicacy, being more considerate and coaxing and trying to find a way, how what is. And so I think that's really interesting. And that's quite poignant is about as well about communications, that how do women communicate to their men? Do they come from their yang and really directing immediately, or is there a way of how do I foreplay to your heart rather than having that straight dive?
Yeah, it sounds so great. I mean, I very much like this idea of of the opposite polarization of hearts, because it actually explains quite a lot. Well, we women talk lots about feelings, emotions, and men quite often are not that much into it. And as you say, they cross their legs, figuratively speaking, because, well, it's something that probably just overwhelms them. And they do not really want to engage in that kind of conversations very much. But well, yeah, exactly. It's one of the things that we should also think how we communicate our feelings and emotions in a relationship, because it's not only about communicating them, but also making this communication sort of digestible for the other partner, not overwhelming them with something that they are maybe not ready for or not in this particular form. So that's also something to definitely remember about. Well, I am impressed with all the things that I've learned today from you about intimacy and about tantric sex as well. Thank you very much for sharing this with me and with our listeners.
Well, thank you so much. It's truly been my pleasure, and it's always lovely to talk to you. And
Likewise.
thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for listening to today's episode on intimacy with my special guests, Anne Blunt. If you would like to share your thoughts about what Anne and I discussed in this episode, well, don't hesitate to do so and please reach out. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please like, share and subscribe. Also, if you want to learn more on dating, love and relationships, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter and YouTube as Ask Astera, and on LinkedIn and Facebook as Dr. Astera Brilka. Thank you so much for all your support. Thank you for today and talk to you soon. Bye.